Good morning and welcome to The Hill. I'm Catherine and we're glad you're here. If this is your first time with us, be sure to stop by in the lobby at the Connect desk to pick up your free gift. Also, if everyone can go ahead and take out their phones, hopefully you've already started doing that. Don't worry, it's okay. I'm not going to get offended. I need you to take out your phone because we're going to connect. So log on to shumc.life and fill out the Connect card. If you want the hard copy, it's in the seat back in front of you and you can drop it in the offering when it comes around. But while you've also got your phone out, be sure to register for the Worship and Tech Training Day if you haven't done so already. So when you came in this morning, you might have noticed our life group fair is going on. So all of our life groups are going to be doing Jesus Is for 8 weeks. Jesus is, well, you got to go find out. That's what we're doing for 8 weeks is what is Jesus. And so if you're not part of a life group, go out into the lobby and find a life group. Not yet. You got to wait to the end to do that. But anyways, Jesus Is life groups. Bind us together, now and forever. Jesus be glorified. So coming up, Foundation 45, which is for 4th and 5th graders. How cute is that? They are going to go to Rock and Jump on Wednesday, September 19th. They're going to go from 6 to 8 p.m. and they're going to have dinner. It's only $15 and that includes the dinner. So you need to RSVP, go to shumc.life and let them know about all the 4th and 5th graders that you are sending to Rock and Jump because, I mean, let's be honest, Wednesday night, they need to go somewhere, right? So anyways, go online, sign up for all the things, sign up for the Tech Day, sign up for Rock and Jump, do all of the things. And then I'll be here next week with more fun from The Hill.
And there we go. Hey, now we're wired for sound. All right. So I keep telling them, I'm like, I can't even find the button on my microphone. So there, I just proved it right there in front of a room full of everybody. Hey, grab your bulletin if you got a bulletin when you came inside real quick. And do me a favor, flip it over on the back side if you would, because what you're going to find right there is going to be a couple of things that we think are really important. There's a space for you to jot down and take some notes because I think you're going to find that there's going to be something that I'm going to say. There's going to be a thought, an idea, maybe some scriptures that will be really important for our time together. And so I would invite you to jot those down. And then what you'll find at the very bottom, you'll find the GPS, and that stands for Grow, Pray, and Study. And around here, that's just a simple little Bible reading mechanism. And so we all really know at the end of the day that we probably need to be reading the scripture and kind of walking through the Bible, but we really don't know where to begin. And so we here at Sugar Hill have kind of done this. We've done a little bit of the heavy lifting for you. And so we've kind of created an opportunity for you to kind of be connected and read along with us in the scripture. So I would invite you to do that. You know, I was standing in the back before we get into our sermon this morning. I was standing in the back and I was talking with Lynn, and here's what I said. I said, you know, and I was talking about the team, the kids that were up here. I said, you know, it's uncommon for a school to have a worship team that talented. And she goes, oh yeah, I know. I said, no, like really, like that's a unicorn in the world. It really, really is. Because I don't know of any Christian school that I'm aware of. My kids went to Christian school that has a worship team that's as good as ours. So can we just give it up for our kids? And so thank you to faculty, to academy, to parents, to those who work with kids and invest in a younger generation of young people. We are deeply appreciative of all the work that you guys do. And so this morning, we're going to kind of spend some time talking about something a little bit different, and it's this. I knew this day was coming. I knew it was. I knew it was. It was out there, and it was going to be a day where it arrived, and finally it did in my life. It arrived on August 17th when my wife and I moved my son into his dorm room at school. He had transferred. He got his associate's degree up at the University of North Georgia, and so he transferred. So he's now at UNC Asheville, North Carolina, and so he's there. So we moved him in Friday, August 17th, and so so he's there. He's now doing that thing. And my daughter, of course, my older child is married, and she's out of the house, and she's got kids of her own, and so that means that Gay and I, my wife, we're now empty nesters. Like some empty, people over there, you get it over there, right? Like that's it, which means like you survived the parenting journey or something like that. No, you know what that means? It means party. No, no. Hashtag date night every night. Okay, that's what that means. It really doesn't. Actually, what it really means when you're an empty nester, it means this. What Netflix show do you want to watch? I don't know. What Netflix show do you? I don't know. I'm tired. Let's go to bed. Okay, we go to bed. Like at 9, That's exactly what it means. It really does. So we're empty nesters. It's like this new season in our life. We're still trying to kind of figure this thing out. Like I was talking to somebody out in the hallway after we gotten back. It was like the Sunday after we'd taken our son up or whatever. And he said, how'd it go? I said, yeah, it's pretty tough. And, kind of sounds a silent ride back. And he said, yeah. And then he was saying this. He said, it took us a while to adjust too, like 3 days. But no, you get used to it, you really do. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that. Listen, I'll say all that just simply to say this, to let you know. And you already know this because you're smart people. Life goes by fast, right? Like it does. And I know you don't think it will, especially if you're like a parent of young kids, because you just live in this perpetual state of when will they get over this, and when will they stop doing that, and when will they move on to the next stage, and the next thing, and that's it. But it's true. Life moves really fast. It was the late Billy Graham who said these words when a college student asked him and said, what's the greatest thing that surprised you about life? And he said this. He said, the brevity of it. And in his autobiography, which was entitled Just As I Am, he writes this. He recalled that exchange, and he said, as I've been working on this book, many of the things that I've recounted seem as if they happened only yesterday. Time moves so quickly, and no matter who we are or what we have done, the time will come when our lives will be over. And the psalmist kind of points us in the same direction. He writes this in Psalm chapter 90, verse 12. It says, teach us how short our life is so that we may become wise. And elsewhere, Xander read for us this morning from the passage in Ecclesiastes, the wisest man who's ever lived, Solomon, writes these words in Ecclesiastes 3. For everything, let's read this one together. Can we do that? For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven. That's it. And there's this time for all this kind of seasons. And so, I'm in a new season of life, and my son is in a new season of life, and my daughter, she just recently had their second child, and so they're in a new season of life. Kids have come back to school, and so it's a whole new season as they're stepping into new grades. It's a new football season, and well, for some teams, it's a new season. My team still stinks because I'm a UT Vols fan. Y'all pray for me. There's healing out there somewhere. And it's just same old for us. So, we still stink. But, but for other teams, it's new. It's a season we're weeks away from the fall season. Anybody ready for fall? Yes, absolutely. Like the humidity. I was sitting early in the morning. I thought, I'll go sit on the front porch. And so I asked Siri, what the humidity was outside. And it was like 100%. I was like, nope. Just yuck. When will this I'm waiting for the change in the season. And so it's just amazing to me how we kind of come into these seasons in our lives. And so it just reminds us that time marches on. And like, for example, I was downstairs in the academy one day, and it was when parents and kids were coming in, and we were getting ready. School hadn't started yet. And I'm just always amazed at how much kids grow over the summer, And so these two boys come in, they're brothers, and they walked in, and I was like, what did your parents feed you over the summer? Because they had shot up, and they've just gotten so tall. And so it amazes me about how these times in our lives, they start marching on. And so here we've got something here that kind of describes the whole movement of your life as a parent, or maybe you're a grandparent in the life of your grandkids or whatever it is. And so from the time a child is born, you've got about 936 weeks until they graduate. And so there's marbles in these jars, and so every marble sort of represents a week. You get 52 weeks, right? So you get 52 marbles in a year. So by the time they're in about fourth grade, they're about 9 years old or so, you got about 468 weeks. You're about half done. Well, that's shocking, right? You're like, oh, exactly. And then it's going to move on down until finally when they're a senior and they're getting ready to launch out into the world or school or wherever it is. And so from somewhere in that period, you're going to get just, you got your final 52 weeks. And so here's the truth. The truth of the matter is, and you already know this because every one of you in the room, you've experienced it. Some of you already have kids and they're grown and they're gone, right? You have grandkids. Some of you, you're fortunate enough, maybe you're old enough, you got like great grandkids. And so you're really at a place where you're influencing people. But the truth of the matter is you sit here and you look at all these things and each one of these sort of representing the stages and phases, if you will, of life, of the movement of students. The truth of the matter is this, you're losing your marbles. I mean, you are. You are. This is the way it works, right? Like we're losing. In other words, what it really comes down to is we're losing the ability to influence our children for the kingdom of God. And so this is what we want to do with our time. Is we want to use it in such a way that we can influence others. We can influence kids. And so there are some things that we're going to be able to do, and there's some things that we're not. Like you're just not going to be able to persuade the toddler to eat Brussels sprouts. Right? Like if you do, you should win an award, You are probably not going to persuade your child or influence your child, especially when they're a teenager, to like not roll their eyes at you, You've lived through that one, or if you haven't, you will. It's coming, trust me, You can't stop a teenager from longing to be independent. It's just, it comes with the territory. Okay, but here's what every one of you know. Again, I'm going to say it again. Time flies. It moves so fast. So this morning, what I really want to do is I want to spend the amount of time that I have left talking to you about something I'm going to need you to do when you go home. And the reason I'm going to need you to do this is because you're going to want to influence, you're going to leverage everything that you have for your kids and for your grandkids. And so whether you have children and they're grown and gone, or you still got kids at home, or whatever it is, mom, dad, kids, teenagers, everybody, I'm just going to need you to do this. And it's this. I need you to go home. I need you to have a fight. I know. You're going, wait, what? That's not the advice I thought I was going to hear at church, right? But I do. I need you to go home, and before the day is over with, what I'm going to need you to do is I'm going to need you to have a fight in your family, but I don't need you to fight with each other. I need you to learn how to fight for each other. Okay? And so that's what I want to talk about in the time that we have left together. It's not a question of if you're going to fight, right? Like families fight. Some of you would go, oh, you better believe we fight. Right? Have you ever had a fight in the car on the way to church? Don't lie in the house of God. You know you have, okay? Right? You have. You had the fight. It's like, hey, let me turn around. We don't have to go to church today. We're going to go to church, and we're going to get there, and somebody's going to act saved. Right? All right? Whatever that is, right? And you're just going to, you're going to straighten up. You better act like somebody, okay? Seriously, because I'm not going to put up with this. We're going to walk in, we're going to be happy. Somebody better smile. Hey, how are you? We're just fine. You ain't fine. You were fighting in the car, right? Or it's the thing where you were fighting about where you're going to go eat lunch after. He's like, I don't want to go eat at Zaxby's, or whatever it is. That's it. I just need you to learn how to. It's not a question of whether you're going to fight. It's a question of how you're going to fight. Okay. And so this is because this is what it really comes down to. I think there are, and we're going to apply this to parenting for just a moment, because I think what you've got is you've got rules-based parenting, and then you have relational-based parenting, and so well, you actually see this in the scripture, really, and it kind of bears out well. It's in John chapter 1. It's verse 14. It goes like this. The Word became flesh, talking about Jesus. The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us, and we have seen His glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, and here it is, full of grace and truth. And so I think you have grace parents, right? And you have truth parents. And we want to be both. We really need to be both because that's the perfect combination. But sometimes when it comes down to things like parenting or whatever, and let's just take curfew. Curfew seems to be a good thing. It's like you have the rules-based parent or, the truth-based parent, and they're going to be like, no, the curfew's at 10 o'clock. And so when I say 10, I mean 10. My mom and dad used to tell me nothing good happens after 11 o'clock, So it was like, nothing good happens after 11 o'clock. I was like, so it's like, you need to be home by 10. And so I'd, get home. And then one day I was late, and it was like 10:15 or 10:30 or something like that, and I just lost track of time. And I was like, it's no big deal. And my friend goes, well, don't worry about it. I was like, no, I got to go. He said, what are you going to be, more late? And I went, yeah, that's right. What are you going to be, more late? I was like, you're right. So I showed up like an hour and a half late. You can be more late. You can. You really, really can. I discovered pretty quick from my mother and father, oh, yes, sir, you can be more late. And so just, whatever your curfew is, you just want to go home. And so you got it, it's like 10 o'clock, and it means like, hey, don't be turning into the neighborhood at 10 o'clock. Don't be sitting in the car on your phone, Snapchatting with your friends or whatever at 10 o'clock. No, you need to be in the house at 10 o'clock. That's kind of like the rules-based parent. That's the truth-based parent. Then you've got on the other side is the relational, the grace-based parent, which is like, yeah, 10 is good, 10-ish, right around there or whatever. And then they're not home around 10-ish, whatever that is, and it's like 10:05, and you're kind of nervous, and you're kind of looking out the window. And then, of course, now they have apps on your phone so you can track your kid, like Life 360 is just amazing. You're welcome. All the kids are like, way to go, Pastor Jeff, thanks. But, Life 360, and so you're looking for your kid, because you're not going to send them a text because they're driving, and you're like, okay, they're still. Or you're like, why are you still at your friend's house? I said, be home, and, this kind of thing. And so finally they show up, and you're like, hey, I'm so glad you're here, and you're not like dead in the ditch, and, it's really good, and why don't we go have some hot chocolate or whatever. And so you've got these two styles, if you will, of parenting in the arena of this kind of truth and grace idea. And so what we want to do is we just want to say, how do you handle that? Like how do you handle one that goes, no, it's this, and the other one that goes, no, it's this. And so it's this moment, right? Like in your parenting, when it becomes, I'm right and you're wrong. Because that's what happens when you're fighting with people rather than for people. It's a zero-sum game. But when we turn into the Scriptures, here's what we find, and what we discover in Matthew chapter 22 is that this passage, you're very familiar, you probably heard this one before, it goes like this. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees with his reply, they met together to question him again. One of them, an expert in religious law, tried to trap him with this question, Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? Jesus replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. And this is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. Here's what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, just listen, the key, most important thing that you're going to do in your life is you're going to learn how to love God. Just love God with everything that's in you. Everything that you have, all that's within you, love God. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, all your mind, everything. Oh, and by the way, the next thing you need to do, which is equally as important, is you need to love your neighbor like you love yourself. And so Jesus is saying, you want to know what this God thing is really all about? It's about this. It's not about rules, and it's not about laws, and it's not about the do's and the don'ts and all the kind of stuff. No. It's really about pursuing a relationship with God out of love. Because here's the thing. As it relates to your life, your parenting, your influence, your the fact that you're losing your marbles and how you're going to fight with your family, it has to do with this. This is exactly how God fights for you. God fights for you in an amazing display in Luke chapter 23, which is the crucifixion chapter in the Gospel of Luke. He's dying, he's on the cross, his arms stretched wide, and the people there are fighting with Jesus. The Pharisees and the Sadducees and the religious leaders are all kind of gathered around, the Romans and everything, and they're all gathered around the base of the cross, and they're yelling at Jesus, right? Like, you said you'd do this, and you could come down, and all this kind of stuff. And they're yelling at him, and they're fighting with him. Meanwhile, on the cross, arms spread wide, Christ is fighting for them. Fighting for them and fighting for salvation. For them, right? And so it's almost as if Jesus is going, listen, I'm not going to fight with you, I'm going to fight for you. And that's a radical reorientation of this whole idea. Remember what he said from the cross? He said these words in Luke chapter 23, verse 34. Let's read it together. Father, forgive them because they don't know what they are. Yeah, they don't know what they're doing. They have no clue what's going on. And you know what? While they're there and they're fighting with Jesus, he was fighting for them. And you know this too. There is a huge difference, isn't there, between fighting with somebody and fighting for somebody? Absolutely. I mean, there just is, because again, if you're going to fight with somebody, it's like, hey, I've got to win and you have to lose, and I'm going to be the winner and you are most definitely going to be the loser. But if you fight for somebody, life looks incredibly different, right? Like, it's not a matter of I've got to be right and because you're wrong. No, instead, we have to ask the question, especially as it relates to, say your marriage or your kids or your grandkids or your son-in-law or your daughter-in-law or your adult parents, your senior adult parents, right? Like the question looks like this. What would it look like if I started fighting for these people rather than with these people? And what if I followed the example of Jesus, and what would that look like? Well, I want to answer the question, and here's what it looks like. It looks like sacrifice, right? Because that's what it looks like when you fight with somebody or for somebody rather than with somebody. So it means that I'm willing to sacrifice my pride. I might be willing, like I'm thinking about my wife, for example. If I was going to fight for my wife, I would be willing to sacrifice my ego. I would be willing to sacrifice my pride. I'd be willing to give up my wants and my wishes and so forth. In fact, I'd probably do what Paul says. And Paul says this in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave his life for it. Jesus fought for you and fought for you so strongly that he was willing to give up his own life. In fact, this was the song that we just sang, right? Like this was the song. We just sang it. When I was your foe, these were the lyrics. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. This is it. This is the God who fights for us and not with us. And so this is what Jesus does on the cross. And interestingly, this is what we as Christians are called to do in our own lives as well. We're called to fight for one another rather than with each other. Imagine with me for just a second. Here's what I need you to do. Engage your spiritual imagination for just a second and ask yourself this. What would it look like if a church fought for one another rather than with one another? What would it look like if we fought for marriages rather than against marriages? What would it look like if we fought for people rather than with people? What would it look like if for a whole community to fight for people rather than with people? What would it look like if Democrats and Republicans didn't fight with each other, but they fought for each other? And we could walk away from all the partisan rancor and all the venom and the nonsense, and instead we just gathered around the notion that we are a blood-bought church in the name of Jesus and the people who he fought for, which is you and me, and we all kind of came together and we just said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to fight for one another rather than with one another, right? I'm thinking we just might change the world. And isn't that really kind of what he wanted us to do anyway? Right? Like what if moms started fighting for the relationship with sons and daughters? And what if dads started fighting for relationships with sons and daughters? And what if adults started fighting for the relationship with senior adults? And this guy, what if teenagers, listen to me, what if you started fighting for a relationship with your mom and dad? Right? Like how many of you, just out of curiosity, how many of you have very young kids? Like young parents in the room? Yep, there we go. Yep, you're there. Listen, you're on a journey. You just are. You're on a journey, and the journey you're on, and this is the way we're all kind of on this journey, really. And it goes like this. It moves from control to influence. This is the continuum that you have right in front of you. You're moving from control to influence. And so you're going to get to the point in your life, right, to where the only thing that you're going to have left one day is going to be influence. How many of you are parents of preschoolers? Like you got preschool kids. There you go. I got good news for you. This is the most control you'll ever have over your children. Right? So enjoy it because you can say, because I said so. Right? Like that works when they're 3. I mean, it really does. And they're like, okay, Try that when, they're 13 or 17 or whatever. And not so much, I mean, you think you can, and, but you just, well, we'll talk about that later. But you're on this kind of journey, and you're kind of moving, and this is the space that you find yourself in. And so as your kids get older and they start wanting to do things, and then, they're about 8 or 9, and they want to go have a sleepover at somebody's house, and you're going to be like, oh no, what are we going to do? And you got to figure out boundaries and all the stuff, and then they're going to get a driver's license, and then you're like, oh dear God, and then just when your hair turns gray, and or it turns loose, or whatever. And then that's kind of when the whole in that whole era that kind of happens. And so eventually, and finally, they're going to graduate, and somewhere between the ages of about 18 and their early 20s, you're going to ship them off into school or life, and you're going to release them, because this is the goal, right? Like, the goal of parenting is to release your kids. It is. Like, you're not raising children, you're raising adults. You just are. Because the goal of parenting isn't to have your kid at 40 years old living in your basement playing video games. And oh, by the way, if you're 40 years old living in your parents' basement playing video games, it's probably time to move out. Okay, like your parents texted me this morning and you're welcome, and so there you go, okay? Come talk to me after the service is over with. Okay, because what we really want to do is we want to make sure that we launch our kids into the world as adults who have the character of Jesus and the hope of Christ seated passionately in their life, longing to be who that God has made them to be. And so the reality is, you kind of think that you've got all the control over the kids that you have in your life, and you do when they're young. Like, you do. But by the time you get to my stage in life, all you got left is influence. Now, I mean, I could probably pull the financial purse strings to some degree, right? But even still, at the end of the day, all I've got left, and you know this, many of you who already have, kids who have grown and gone, you know that what you have left is just influence. Now, listen, here's how influence works, so that we're all kind of on the same page and we're all talking about the same thing together. Influence works like this. You listen to those people that you love, honor, and value most, right? And those are the people that you're going to turn to, and you're going to go, I love you, and I honor you, and I value you, I respect you. I'm going to listen to you. And so you kind of lean into those individuals, and you kind of give them credence and voice in your life. And you know where that starts? It starts with a relationship. So it starts with a relationship, and so that's going to start with you, mom and dad, or grandparents. If you're a grandparent, here's the joy of grandparenting. I'm a grandparent. The joy of grandparenting is this. It's kind of like a do-over. It's kind of like a do-over without all the responsibility, which is really cool, and that's awesome. It's like God says, you survived your own kids and you didn't kill them, so I'm going to give you these, and just try not to mess it up, And so it's a do-over moment, and it's a beautiful thing. And so again, you want to build the relationship. All that to simply say this. So invest. So here's a practical point. When your kids are preteens, here's what I recommend you do. Go out to breakfast one day. Now, I know you can go up to them, and you're going to go up to your daughter or your son, and you're going to go, hey, by the way, listen, why don't we just get together like maybe next weekend or something, and let's just go eat breakfast. The first thing they're going to go is, wow, what's wrong? And you go, nothing, not a thing. And so you just go eat breakfast and just hang out and have a good time. Don't preach, don't bring your Bible, don't be weird, don't do anything, like that. We're going to look at the book of Exodus. No, don't do that. Just leave them alone and just eat breakfast and have fun, and it'll be good. And here's what you'll do. You'll do that over time, and I guarantee you'll win the right to be heard, and you're going to leverage influence in the life of your son or your daughter. And it'll be really good. I started doing this with my son when he was about 12, maybe 13 years old, somewhere around there. Maybe once a month we go eat breakfast, and we just talk, and we had a good time, and conversation would come up, and I'd get the opportunity to drop a little nugget here or there, or drop a truth there, and that was about it. And then you kind of just go on, but just do this. And so and then what I did was in his junior year, when he was graduating, I started writing in a journal. I read a book, and it was about the struggles of young men and in life and everything. I read this book, and I wrote in it and everything, and there was a journal that accompanied it. And I filled out the journal, and I wrote it from a perspective of a 52-year-old guy looking back on his life as if he were in his 20s. And so I journaled it from the perspective of, if I could counsel me. And so it took me like 2 years to work through the whole thing, so it took me longer than I really wanted, but I finally did it. And so the Friday, or actually a few days before he left, we went to breakfast again. And so we went to breakfast, and we sat down, and I gave him the book, and it was written in and marked in and underlined and wrote in. And I was like, read this, and this is good, and practice this, and do this kind of thing. Don't forget this. And in the journal, it was just my account of my own life in my early 20s, and going, I'm giving you a snapshot into my life. If I could have counseled me, so I'm really counseling you. I hope you listen. By the way, if you're watching, I hope you're reading it. But anyway, I love you, Drew. But anyway, and so I would do this, and I would try, and so I gave it to him. And so he sent me a text like days later. He goes, "Hey, Dad." He goes, "Thanks, man. I've started the Killing Lions thing." And I was like, "Yes, my man." So I'm here to say, all you're going to have left is influence one day. So when they're little, you got control. That's great. But one day it comes to influence. And so when you find yourself in the space of influence, here's what you need to do. You just need to realize that when it comes to this issue of influence, when you fight with somebody, you lose influence. When you fight for somebody, you gain influence, right? That's it. So this morning, here's what I need you to do. What I need you to do. Sometime before the sun sets, go home, have a fight. And don't fight with your family. Don't fight with your spouse. Don't fight with your kids. Fight for your spouse. Fight for your kids. Fight for your in-laws. Fight for your grandchildren. Fight for them, not with them. Why? Because you want to leave your kid one day when your kids are gone. One day you want to leave your kid a legacy of influence. Do you know why? I'll tell you why. Because you're losing your marbles.